The cold December breeze swept through the narrow alleys as the Johnson family's car entered the small town of Willow Creek. Nestled deep within New York's dense forests, the town exuded an eerie tranquility. This was supposed to be a fresh start for Peter, Rachel, and their 10-year-old daughter, Lily. As the car pulled up in front of the house, Rachel's eyes widened. A 3-story colonial-style house stood before them, its green ivy vines nearly swallowing the exterior walls. In the yard, an ancient oak tree swayed its gnarled branches in the wind, as if whispering secrets of the past. "It's beautiful," Rachel murmured, though a shiver ran down her spine. Peter forced a smile. The house was old and the price was suspiciously low. Rumors of something terrible happening there had caused its value to plummet. But Peter wasn't one to believe in ghost stories. Lily, however, seemed oddly captivated. She gazed up at the attic window, where she thought she saw the faint shadow of a figure. "Mommy, someone's watching us," she said, clutching Rachel's hand tightly. Rachel glanced up, but the window was empty. "It's just your imagination, sweetheart." They stepped inside, and the old wooden floorboards groaned beneath their feet. The air inside was heavy, as though it hadn't been disturbed for years. Dim, dust-laden sunlight filtered through the cracked windows. Faded floral wallpaper peeled from the walls, adding to the unsettling atmosphere. "A little fixing up, and it'll be perfect," Peter reassured, though even he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling creeping over him. As Rachel unpacked and Lily played in her new room, Peter decided to explore. That's when he saw it, a door. Unlike the others, this door was painted blood red, with an old, rusted chain hanging loosely across it. Dark soot stains marked its surface, making it appear even more sinister. Peter felt an inexplicable chill. He tried pulling the chain, but it didn't budge. "Probably a storage room," he muttered. But a gnawing sense of dread lingered. That night, as the wind howled outside and the old pipes groaned, a whisper echoed through the darkness. "Leave now." Rachel's eyes shot open, her heart pounding. Peter lay sound asleep beside her, unaware. But Rachel knew what she heard. A voice, but whose? Morning sunlight crept through the curtains, casting a pale glow inside the house. Yet the memory of the whispered voice still lingered in Rachel's mind. She tried to dismiss it as a bad dream. Peter was already in the kitchen, brewing coffee. "How was your night?" he asked with a cheerful smile. "It was fine," Rachel lied, forcing a smile. She chose not to mention the whisper. A little later, Lily bounded in, her eyes twinkling. "Mommy, I love my room. And guess what? I made a friend." Rachel blinked in surprise. "A friend? Already?" "Yeah," Lily nodded excitedly. "He was at my window last night. He waved and said hi." Rachel felt a sudden pang of fear. "At your window, honey? There's no one outside." Lily giggled. "He said he lives here. His name is Michael." Peter chuckled, brushing it off. Kids and their imaginary friends. But Rachel didn't laugh. Something about it unnerved her. That evening, Peter returned to the red door. It called to him, as if something behind it demanded attention. He ran his fingers along the cold, rough wood, then reached for the rusted chain. The chain rattled. But this time, it moved on its own. Peter stumbled back, his heart racing. The sound of the chain echoed through the dimly lit hallway. "Peter, everything all right?" Rachel called from the kitchen. Yeah, I'm fine," Peter replied, his voice trembling. He tried to shake it off. Maybe it was just his imagination. But deep down, he knew better. That night, as Rachel tucked Lily into bed, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She kissed her daughter goodnight, switched off the lights, and turned to leave. But from the corner of her eye, she saw something. At the end of the dim hallway stood a shadow. Tall, motionless, dark. Rachel froze, her breath caught in her throat. She blinked. The shadow was gone. Her pulse pounded as she stood there, staring at the empty darkness. Later, when the house was silent and everyone was asleep, the whispers returned. "Leave now." Rachel's eyes snapped open, her chest tightening with fear. The voice was louder this time. She shook Peter awake, but he remained in a deep slumber. Rachel no longer believed this was a nightmare. She knew now they were not alone. Morning arrived, but the shadows of the night still clung to Rachel's thoughts. The chilling whispers, the dark figure in the hall. It wasn't just her imagination. Something was wrong with the house. Peter, however, remained dismissive. "Old houses make noises, Rach. The wind, creaky pipes, it's nothing." Rachel wanted to believe him. She wanted to ignore the gnawing fear that seemed to grow with every passing hour. But even in the bright daylight, the house felt cold. Lily, on the other hand, was strangely unaffected. She played with her stuffed toys in the living room, humming an eerie tune. It was a song Rachel didn't recognize. "Where did you learn that song, sweetheart?" Rachel asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Lily smiled, her innocent eyes gleaming. "Michael taught me. He said it's his favorite. The mention of Michael once again sent a shiver down Rachel's spine. The crimson door, Peter's curiosity about the basement door, had only grown. That afternoon, unable to resist any longer, he brought out his toolbox. If we're going to live here, I need to know what's behind that door. Rachel protested, but Peter was adamant. The air seemed heavier as he approached the crimson door. He pried at the lock, his hands trembling slightly. Finally, with a loud snap, the chain broke. The door creaked open, revealing a steep set of stone steps leading into darkness. A damp, musty odor wafted from below. A smell of decay and something else, something foul. Peter hesitated. "Hello?" His voice echoed down the staircase. No response, only the oppressive silence. "Peter, I don't like this," Rachel whispered, clutching Lily tightly. Ignoring the gnawing fear, Peter descended the stairs. The walls were lined with old bricks, cracked and damp. Cobwebs clung to the ceiling. The only light came from the dim bulb that flickered weakly above. And then, he saw it. In the far corner of the basement stood a small wooden table. Upon it, strange symbols were carved into the surface. A pentagram, twisted figures, in cryptic writings. Melted candle wax pulled around the edges. But what caught Peter's eye most was the photo. A faded black and white picture. A family, a man, a woman, and 2 children. Their hollow eyes stared blankly through the paper. But the date scrawled at the bottom made Peter's blood run cold. 1970, the same year Ronald DeFeo Jr. had murdered his family in the Amityville house. The walls speak that night as the Johnson family tried to settle in. The atmosphere grew heavier. The walls seemed to pulse, almost as if they were alive. And then it began. Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks echoed through the house. Rachel bolted upright in bed, her breathing ragged. Peter stumbled to the window, but there was nothing. The knocking came again. "Peter, it's coming from inside the house," Rachel gasped. The sound reverberated through the walls like unseen fists pounding in rage. Lily's terrified scream pierced the air. They rushed to her room, finding her curled up under the blankets. "He's angry, Mommy," Lily whimpered. "Michael said we shouldn't have opened the door." Rachel's heart pounded. "What do you mean, sweetheart? What did Michael tell you?" Lily's voice was barely a whisper. "He said we woke them up." The house had changed. It was no longer just an old building with creaky floors and drafty windows. It was alive. It breathed, and it was angry. Rachel barely slept that night. Every sound, every whisper of wind sent chills down her spine. She kept replaying Lily's words in her head. "We woke them up." Morning arrived, but the light did little to chase away the unease that gripped her. Peter, still in denial, sat at the dining table, sipping his coffee as if nothing had happened. "We're letting our imaginations get the best of us," he insisted. "There's a logical explanation for everything." Rachel stared at him. "Logical? Peter, something is wrong with this house. Lily is talking to a ghost. We're hearing knocks in the middle of the night. And you found that?" She lowered her voice. "That photo in the basement." Peter sighed. "It's just a coincidence. Maybe the previous owners were obsessed with the Amityville case. It doesn't mean anything." Rachel wanted to believe him, but deep down, she knew they were in danger. The scratch marks. Later that day, Rachel was unpacking boxes in the hallway when she noticed something disturbing. The walls, once covered in faded wallpaper, had scratches, deep, jagged marks, as if something with sharp claws had ripped through the wood. She ran her fingers over the grooves. "Peter," she called, her voice shaking. Peter walked over and frowned. "What the hell?" He touched the scratches. These weren't here before. Rachel's stomach twisted. Something's trying to get out. Peter tried to brush it off. "It's probably just old damage from the previous owners." But then Lily appeared at the end of the hall. Her eyes were distant, her face pale. "No, Daddy," she said softly. "They were made last night." Rachel's breath hitched. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Lily hesitated. "Michael told me they want us gone. And if we don't leave soon, they'll make us." Wasi Dexter in the mirror. That evening, as Rachel stood in front of the bathroom mirror, brushing her hair, she felt it again. The presence, her breath fogged the glass slightly. She set the brush down and turned to leave. But as she moved, she saw it. A dark figure standing behind her in the reflection. Tall, motionless, its face shrouded in shadow. Rachel spun around. Nothing. Her heart pounded against her ribs. She turned back to the mirror. The figure was still there, staring at her from inside the glass. Her scream shattered the silence. Peter rushed in, finding Rachel collapsed against the sink, trembling. "What happened?" Rachel pointed at the mirror, but the shadow was gone. She could barely breathe. Someone was standing behind me." Peter ran his hands through his hair, his expression unreadable. Rach, you need to calm down. Rachel snapped. Calm down? Are you even listening to me? There was a man in the mirror, Peter. Mommy's right. Both of them turned. Lily stood at the doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit. He's watching us now. Rachel's skin went ice cold. He's waiting, Lily whispered, for the right moment. The basement door opens. That night, the storm outside raged. The wind howled through the trees. The power flickered, casting eerie shadows across the walls. And then, bang! The sound echoed through the house. A deep, resonating boom from below. Peter shot up from bed. Rachel clutched the blanket, her body rigid with fear. Bang! Again. Peter grabbed the flashlight and stepped cautiously into the hallway. Rachel followed close behind. Lily was already awake, standing in her doorway. It's coming from the basement, she whispered. The air was thick with tension as they approached the crimson door, the same door Peter had unchained earlier. And now, it was wide open. A gust of cold air rushed past them, carrying the scent of damp earth and something else, something rotten. Rachel grabbed Lily's hand, her entire body trembling. Peter, close it! Now! But Peter just stared into the darkness below. His face was pale, his eyes unblinking, because from the depths of the basement, something was breathing. Peter's flashlight trembled as the beam struggled to penetrate the darkness below. The heavy, guttural breathing echoed from the basement, slow and labored, like something ancient had awakened. Peter, shut the door! Rachel's voice cracked with fear, but Peter stood frozen, transfixed by the void beneath him. Rachel, overcome with dread, grabbed his arm and yanked him away. She slammed the basement door shut and hastily locked it with the remaining latch. We're not going down there, she whispered, her hands trembling. Lily, her eyes wide and fearful, clung to Rachel's leg. He's still down there, she murmured, and he's angry. Rachel wanted to run, to leave the house and never look back. But Peter, stubborn as always, refused. We're not abandoning our home, he said firmly. Whatever this is, we'll find a way to stop it. But deep down, even Peter knew the house had other plans. The whispers returned. That night, the whispers returned. Rachel awoke to the sound of hushed voices, like hundreds of murmurs crawling through the walls. She strained to understand the words, but they were fragmented, chilling fragments of sorrow, rage, and regret. Why did you wake us? He's watching. The sins of the past can't be buried. Rachel's eyes darted around the darkened room. Peter slept beside her, oblivious. But when she turned toward the door, her breath caught. Lily stood there. Mommy? Lily whispered, her voice unnaturally calm. They're calling for you. Rachel bolted upright. Who's calling for me, baby? Lily's eyes flickered with something unsettling. The ones who died. She paused. They want you to see. And then without another word, she turned and walked away. The next morning, Rachel was determined to uncover the truth. She searched the house for any trace of its past. In the dusty attic, she found a small wooden chest, locked and hidden beneath old, rotting blankets. With trembling hands, she pried it open. Inside was an old, leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with time. The name scrawled on the front sent chills down her spine. Catherine DeFeo, the wife of Ronald DeFeo Sr., one of the victims of the gruesome murders. Rachel flipped through the pages, her heart pounding. Catherine's words unraveled a horrifying tale of fear and torment. The house whispers, "It knows our secrets. Ronald isn't himself anymore. He talks to the shadows. They call him by name. They tell him to kill." Rachel's fingers trembled as she read further. The final entry was stained, the ink smeared, as though written in panic. They said the blood must be spilled. Only then will the house sleep. Rachel slammed the journal shut. The house had fed on blood before, and now it wanted more. Peter's descent. Peter grew distant. The more Rachel spoke of the horrors, the more he withdrew. His temper flared at the slightest provocation, and he spent hours in the basement, though he swore the door remained locked. But Rachel knew better. Late one night, she followed him. She watched from the shadows as Peter stood before the basement door, his hand resting on the old wood. He was muttering, "They're waiting. They said I'll understand soon." Rachel's blood ran cold. "Peter." She grabbed his arm, but his eyes, they were vacant, hollow. "They showed me," he whispered, "the truth. The house was never empty." That night, Rachel slept with Lily in her arms, afraid of what Peter might become. Days passed, and the house continued its torment. Doors slammed shut on their own, shadows twisted unnaturally. The whispers grew louder, but the worst came when Rachel noticed something impossible. A door, a rotting, splintered door at the end of the upstairs hallway, one she had never seen before. Rachel's hands shook as she reached for the knob. The air around it was ice cold. Slowly, she pushed it open. Inside was a small, windowless room. The walls were cracked, covered in dark stains. In the corner stood a rusted metal bed frame, the mattress torn and soiled. And on the wall, written in a child's shaky handwriting, were the words, "They never left." Rachel stumbled back, her breath ragged. But as she turned to flee, she heard it. A low, guttural voice. "Stay." Rachel couldn't stay in denial any longer. She frantically searched for answers, poring over old newspapers, digging through the horrific past of the Amityville murders. But it wasn't just the DeFeo family. There were others, tenants who had moved in over the years, each vanishing without explanation. The house consumed them, one by one. That night, as the storm raged outside, Rachel made her decision. "We're leaving," she told Peter, her voice firm. "Tomorrow morning, we're getting out of here." Peter said nothing. His face was pale, his eyes sunken. But before Rachel could plead further, Lily spoke. "It's too late." Rachel spun toward her daughter. "What do you mean, baby?" Lily's eyes gleamed with unsettling certainty. "He's already chosen." And then the lights flickered, the whispers screamed, and from the basement, the sound of something heavy, dragging across the floor, echoed through the house. Rachel's resolve hardened. The house wanted them broken, but she wouldn't give in. She had to uncover its darkest secrets if she hoped to save Peter and Lily. "I'm going down there," Rachel said, her voice trembling. Peter, though visibly weakened, tried to protest, but Rachel's determination was unwavering. She grabbed the flashlight and crept toward the basement door. The air grew heavier, as though the house itself resisted her every step. "Mommy," Lily whispered, her small voice trembling. "Be careful." The door creaked open. A wave of damp, icy air washed over Rachel. The darkness below seemed endless, but she descended, one step at a time. The whispers grew louder, echoes of the past, crying, screams, pleas for mercy. And then she saw it. A shattered rocking chair, a child's torn shoe, faint handprints smeared across the dirt walls. "This is where it began," Rachel murmured, her voice barely audible. But the worst was yet to come. Rachel's flashlight flickered, shadows twisted unnaturally, as though they had lives of their own. Then, from the corner of her eye, she saw them. Figures. Pale faces emerged from the darkness, the tortured souls that the house had consumed. A mother clutching her lifeless child. An old man with hollow eyes. A teenage boy, his face frozen in terror. "They can't leave," Rachel whispered, tears welling in her eyes. The spirits stared, their sorrow palpable. But one figure stood apart, a tall, looming presence, the same dark entity she had seen in the mirror. "You are mine," the voice growled, low and guttural. Rachel's legs trembled, but she refused to run. "No," she said firmly, though fear clutched at her chest. "You don't control us." But the figure only laughed, a hollow, chilling sound that echoed through the basement. "You will see." Rachel stumbled back up the stairs, her breath ragged. She tried to shake the images from her mind, the soulless eyes, the twisted faces. Peter waited at the top, his eyes glazed. The house's influence over him was growing. "They showed you, didn't they?" Peter's voice was low. "You understand now." Rachel gripped his trembling hands. "We still have a choice. We can break free." But Peter shook his head. "Not until it gets what it wants." Rachel's heart sank. The house wasn't satisfied with the souls it had taken. It wanted more. "It wants Lily." The house groaned, as if alive. The walls pulsed with a dark, unholy energy. That night, Rachel awoke to the sound of footsteps. She bolted upright. Peter was gone. "No, Peter!" She ran through the house, her voice trembling. The whispers led her to the basement once more. But this time, Lily stood at the top of the stairs, her small face pale. "Daddy said he has to finish it," Lily said, tears brimming in her eyes. Rachel's heart pounded. "No, I won't let him." Without a second thought, she descended once more, the weight of the house pressing down on her. At the bottom, Peter stood before a crude stone altar, his hands trembling. The figure loomed behind him, its eyes glowing with malice. "It's time," the entity hissed. Peter raised the rusted dagger, the final step of the ritual. "Peter, no!" Rachel screamed, but the house demanded blood. Rachel lunged forward, her hands gripping Peter's. The force of the house's dark power burned through her, but she didn't let go. "Peter, fight it! You're stronger than this!" For a moment, his eyes flickered, a spark of the man she once knew. The house roared in fury. The walls trembled. "You are mine!" But Rachel's voice grew louder. No, you will never have us." With one final cry, Peter dropped the dagger. The altar cracked. The shadows writhed in agony, screaming as they were torn apart. The spirits, the lost souls, rose from the darkness. Their hollow eyes softened as they were finally freed. The house groaned one last time. And then, silence. The air grew lighter. The curse had been broken. Peter collapsed into Rachel's arms, his body trembling. Lily ran to them, her small hands clutching Rachel tightly. "It's over," Rachel whispered. The family stumbled outside, the morning sun breaking through the lingering mist. As they drove away, the house stood eerily still. But from the cracked basement window, a faint whisper echoed, "Until we meet again."